Today, we're going to analyze a sector that is the largest sector in the country. Frankly, it blew my mind. This sector contributes $1 trillion to India's GDP. And what's surprising is that 22% of all employment comes from here. So it seems like if India has to become a rich nation and become trillions of dollars in the future, the number one economy, this sector needs to grow. In fact, it's called the backbone of the nation as well. It's actually the micro, small, and medium enterprises. So not only will we understand how this industry can grow, we'll also talk about two companies as well. But before we do that, can you give a like and subscribe, please? Because
subscribe.
You hear that? The writers, the crew, everyone's really crying. Kar do like, give a subscribe. Okay, let's talk about what MSMEs mean. So MSME is nothing but micro, small and medium. So here it is. So I'll put this in order. Here it is, right? So now what do we mean by micro? Remember, all the small businesses that you see in the country are represented by this, and it's $1 trillion. So don't think of small businesses as small. They're actually India's entrepreneurial system. So first I want you to focus on just the last line over here. You'll see micro is not more than 5 crores. So it's 0 to 5 crores in annual turnover. That is a micro enterprise. Look at the last line here. Small is from 5 to 50 crores. And then medium is 50 crores to 250. And then there's a definition of how much plant and machinery they've spent on. Here it's 50, 10, 1. But I think revenue is a good way to understand what this is. This means India is a nation of entrepreneurs. Now I understand we say startup and all, but hamare blood mein hai, because 30% of all industry is actually this. And you need a founder mindset to actually run a small business. But what's going for us is this. India is the most populous nation in the world. We might not talk about sex, but we're having a lot of it. We're the most populous nation with 1.4 billion people, and it's also the youngest population in the world. Now, this means that we have the youngest workforce, which has the ability to actually move the GDP. And it seems like MSMEs, or the founder mindset, the entrepreneurship mindset, is the best way to do this. In fact, I don't think we can have large companies solving India's GDP problem. I'll tell you why. So if we look at India's map, think about what grows where. And certain things can only grow in certain places. Now let's think about cotton. Cotton is grown in this area, in Gujarat, in these areas. Then if you look at sugar, you'll find a lot of it on the north. And then there's paper, cashew, and whatnot. My point is very simple. India is divided geographically and by population in a really diverse way, which means at certain places you won't get certain items. This means you can't have one company producing everything that the country needs, because the country is so large and the people have different requirements. The culture in the south is very different from the north or the west or center. So having MSMEs actually produce for that area is the only solution. Now, if you look at a smaller country, let's say Korea or Taiwan, there's a single country that contributes a very large amount to the entire GDP. So in Korea's case, Samsung contributes 20% of the GDP. Now, do you think something like that could happen in India? Like one Infosys contributing to 20% of the GDP? Chances are really low. We're a very large nation, and the chances of one company contributing a very large amount to the entire nation is very, very slim. In fact, the MSME is probably the only solution. If you look at Taiwan, you have Taiwan Semiconductor Manufacturing Company that contributes 15% of GDP. In fact, it feels like we don't need a nation of 100 Infosys. We probably need 1 million doers or 1 million entrepreneurs who understand financial freedom, who know how to build businesses, and come with that doer founder mindset. And this is why we think that kind of education should be completely free. So we run something called LearnApp Prime, where you can go and apply, learn product building, marketing, trading, investing, for free, but only the doers get in. So there's an application process, there's a selection process, and some of you will be able to attend. It's on a weekend and there are no lectures. You will actually build something to learn something in a community of other doers and learn from each other. I promise you will love it, but please be a little patient. We get a lot of applicants and we can only allow a certain mindset to enter. So if you're interested, the link is in the description. But let's continue with our MSME story. Let's first talk about what do you think an MSME's traits are? Now, before I tell you two public companies which are MSME gems, and I'm sure you love their business model, let me explain the entire industry first. MSMEs are called the backbone of the economy for a reason, and let me show you why that is. Welcome to Economics 101. We're going to understand how GDP and MSMEs are connected. So first we have over here GDP. So what is the formula for GDP? I'm sure you did this in school, but I will remind you what it is and why this is $1 trillion for MSMEs. First is C, which is consumption. Consumption is what the economy or people are actually buying. When people buy, that contributes to GDP. Now, interestingly, consumption happens through employment. So imagine all of the MSMEs hiring different people, giving job opportunities. When they earn, they can spend. And we know that 22% of all employment in India comes through MSMEs. So that's their first contribution. Then we will add one more factor to this. Let's see what we have here. We have investment. Now, MSMEs take $120 billion worth of loans from banks. Now, as we know, that's how the economy runs. When they take investment, they set up plant, machinery, even startups for that matter, come under MSMEs. So even LearnApp, for example, is an MSME. Investment comes in and this 120 billion is actually growing at 35% yearly, which means that they are generating some income from this and growing. So that's the second contribution to GDP MSMEs do. Then we'll add one more thing over here, which I am actually going to skip for now, going straight to this part. X minus M, which is exports minus imports. India, 48% of all exports are done by MSMEs. That's an amazing number. Almost half of all exports are done by this sector. Overall, if you look at exports and imports, they are actually exporting more than they are importing. So this number is actually a positive number. It's not a deficit. So that's the next contribution. But there's still one problem over here, right? We know that this is $1 trillion. Also, I don't know why people say dollars when you're talking about India. It just sounds more impressive, actually. But I think the problem over here is we haven't really hit the G spot before. We have not been able to find it, and investment isn't coming from the government. And we need to figure this out. But recently, things changed. Now the question is, how does this 1 trillion become a larger number? And we can do some simple math. So right now, let's assume that the current growth rate of MSME continues. That's the first assumption, which is 35%. And we have this thing in investing called the rule of 72. It's an easy way to find out when money will double once you have the internal rate of return. So divide 72 by 35% and you'll get the number of years it will take to actually double this number over here. So that number you'll get roughly 2.3. So what we should do is over here, basically means by 2027, this number over here will become $2 trillion. And then let's project this a little bit more. This by 2030, this number becomes $4 trillion. Now, 4 trillion is actually a really big number. Look at the top 10 countries in the world and look at the GDP. You'll see that 4 trillion, not a lot of countries actually qualify. And I'm not talking about India's GDP. I'm talking about MSME's contribution to the GDP could be about 4 trillion by 2030, which is almost as large as many large economies. So MSME is actually a really important sector. And I think the government has understood that as well. They've come up with a bunch of things to improve. And these are mostly support structures, showing them that we are here to help you if you really need it. the government has done three brilliant things. Of course, they've done tax incentives, they've done PLI schemes, and a bunch of other things. But these three things actually stand out. Let me show you what they are. Okay, so what the government has done, these are three master strokes. The first is access to collateral-free guaranteed credit. Now, this is interesting because you're able to get a loan from the bank without any collateral. And this is at what? The cost of credit will be reduced by about 1%. It's effective from April 1st, 2023. And 90 million MSMEs come under this ambit. But I had a friend and he applied for it. Usko loan nahi mila. So I don't know if this will actually translate to real loans for MSMEs who really need it. But it's a nice thing that the government has actually introduced this. If you have a friend who's taken this, I'd love to know in the comments below whether it worked or not. What do you think? Do you think people will actually get the loans, especially the people who need them? Let's find out. This one I found very interesting as well. It's return of 95% of the forfeited amount relating to a bid. So as you know, when the government needs to work with private companies, they run a bid system. After that, the contract is awarded to a company, and then on completion of the work, the amount is paid out. Now, for many reasons, sometimes this amount is not paid out. Well, not because of anything else, but it could be, say, logistical issues or COVID. COVID is actually a very good example, and this is why contracts executed during the COVID period that could not be executed because of what was happening back then, 95% of that amount will be returned to MSMEs. This is also a nice support system for them. Finally, measures to ensure timely payments by buyers. The small guy, he never gets paid because he doesn't have a voice and no one cares. And that's the definition of MSMEs, right? Small people trying to build a brand, build credibility. So what the government has done, they've ensured that people who are paying out to an MSME cannot claim expenditure, which helps in reducing tax, obviously, until they've actually made the payment to the MSME. And I've seen this in action. It actually works. In fact, if the MSME is not paid within a certain amount of time, there are emails that are triggered from the government. Now, this works as a great deterrent because people get a little worried that government se message aaya, maybe I should clear this amount. And it seems like the pipeline of unpaid dues should reduce because of this. To me, I don't think any of these are very hard changes that they've done, but it shows the government's intent that they want to support this sector. Do you think they should have done something else? I'm sure a lot of you run small businesses, want to learn how product building works, growth marketing works, maybe you want to learn trading or investing. If you're one of those people, tell me, what do you think the government should have done over here to support you guys a little more? Put it in the comments below. Another thing I found really interesting while we were doing this, and you will find too, is that they're called the little ninjas of Dalal Street. There was this nice headline we read. Every third SME IPO in 2022 was a multi-bagger, which meant it gave few X returns in 2022. Now, I'll have to say, in 2022, there was some bull market happening, and of course, there was liquidity, so we saw this. But it's interesting to know that 32 of these people actually gave a multi-bagger return. This doesn't mean the companies are good. It just means that some of these companies listing have a market outside of just private players. The IPO market is also sort of responding to them. The first company we have is Prevest DenPro. Now, should you invest in this company? Absolutely not. This is not a recommendation. Please do not invest. It's just interesting. We're talking about MSMEs. Let's pick a company and see how do they function, just out of curiosity. So Prevest DenPro is a super specialized company that creates equipment for dentistry. Before we look at the financials, let's look at the website. So they say they're the future of dentistry. They talk about different products. If I scroll down, I can see they say 100 dental products established in 1999 in 80 plus countries. We can also see that they have clinical products like cements, this word I cannot pronounce, tooth whitening, etc. There's also impression material. I think that's the stuff where they take impression of the tooth so that they can create a cap for you. Then there are other lab products as well. There are a lot of SKUs I see over here. Let's look at the sales first. We look at the P&L on a yearly basis. We can see 2019 sales went from 19, 23 crores, 28 crores, 38 crores to 50 crores. So there is a straight line growth. Very nice. We can see operating profit margin is actually improving from 20% to 38, 39%, which means somehow they're able to charge a premium and win in the marketplace. That's when margin expansion happens. Tax, no, we can see net profit has increased from 3 crores a year to 5, 7, 12, and 16 crores. But let's look at the balance sheet now. We can see that the company reserves have gone from 10 to 15, 22, 45, 61. This means that they're able to push that money from profits back into reserves, and obviously they would have raised something from the IPO itself. And finally, I don't see any borrowings, right? So we see 2 crores and 0 crores in March 23. So there is no debt. So now let's look at the strengths and weaknesses. We can see that the moat over here is IP. They know how dentists work and what kind of equipment they need. They have the technical know-how. They're also first mover advantage, and they specialize in dentistry. Then there's geographic diversification, which means they're spread across different countries. I think the website said 80 countries. And finally, there's zero debt, a lot of growth, and it's cash rich. So from a small company, that perspective, it's pretty stable. But there's one problem, right? If you look at the weaknesses, there are too many SKUs. There are too many items that they sell. Every item requires research. Every item requires inventory. Every item requires you to go to a dentist and tell them you have it here. So the SKUs are 100 different dental products. So it gets a little difficult to manage inventory. Finally, domestic demand is sluggish. I think about it. How many of your friends don't want to meet you on a weekend or come to late office because they have a dentist appointment? I think this is more common abroad, say in UK and Europe, जहाँ पे a dentist appointment is like a regular checkup where you go every few months. For India, it's not part of a culture to go to a dentist unless दांत ही टूट जाए. So I think there's a cultural reason why domestic demand isn't increasing like crazy as maybe in other countries. And of course, the distribution model is through distributors, which means a person actually physically goes to a dentist's office, tells him about the products, and that's how the sale's done. It's not D2C, which means they're not selling through their website or through branding. I'm not sure if this is a good or bad thing, but basically they are dependent on distributors. The next company is subscribe to LearnApp, man. You're watching this video and you're not hitting that subscribe button. Okay, sorry. The second company is Systango. Again, don't buy this company. We're just thinking and imagining what an MSME company looks like, which is public, and we'll find faults and strengths and just understand the business model for fun. So over here, Systango, what's interesting is if you go on their website, पहले तो you'll see it's a tech company. हम सोचते हैं MSME से ketchup का bottle बनाता होगा. ऐसा नहीं है. MSMEs are companies which can also be digital, right? And a lot of MSME companies are actually digital as well. So this is one such company. Systango, what's interesting about them is that they have Web3 services. So if someone wants to create blockchain, NFT token rollouts, or some kind of DEX integration, which is integrating with an exchange, they're able to do that. And a lot of companies are exploring this. So think about the IT revolution that happened way back. Now with Web3, could that be outsourced to India as well? The second thing that was interesting over here is DevOps, app development, data engineering. All this is pretty normal, but they do end-to-end fantasy sports as well. So if someone wants to create a league or that kind of app, they're actually able to do that end-to-end. So I think most of the customers here will be abroad. I have some reservations about whether this can work or not, but let's go step by step. Let's first look at their financials. So we can see one that they listed just in 2023. We can see their profit and loss. I only have 3 years of data. That sucks. I don't know why it's only 3 years, but let's see what we have. We can see that sales has gone from 13 to 22 to 32 crores. One red flag is that there's not enough data here. I think 3 years is a very short period. It doesn't encapsulate all of the cycles and how the company reacted to those cycles. So that's not a good thing. The other is their OPM, operating profit margin, moves between 21% to 28 and back to 22. So you have that range. Not a very big red flag, I guess. That's fine. The net profit has increased from 2.5 crores to 5.6 to 6.7 crores. I can also see over here that their reserves are increasing and their borrowings are zero. So it's a debt-free company. That's always a good thing. And promoters own a large amount of the company. Also, that is a good thing, which means they have skin in the game in the business. So if you think about the moats and the strengths of this company, one is that they do end-to-end solutions for Web3 and fantasy sports. 2, it's a high TAM. A lot of companies want to explore this area around the world, and I guess they can provide it. Now, can they compete against all the other players? I have no clue, because it's a very competitive market. I can also see that there is some interest by FIIs and DIIs. I guess that's fine. And there's some financial prudence. They're not taking loans. They're not too aggressive. The growth seems nice. Let's look at weaknesses. In my opinion, when someone wants to build a tech company, especially in the US, a lot of them build tech in-house. So I don't know how many people would actually outsource the entire tech, but it happens with very large corporates because their core strength is something else. But would startups and small companies abroad hire, say, a Systango to build their end-to-end solution? I don't know about that. We can see that their dependence on US is pretty high, 67%. But that's expected, right? It's expected that this is outsourced. We can also see that the top 5 customers represent 48% and the top 10 customers represent 65%. Now, this is true for most B2B businesses, that B2B revenue comes from 1, 2, 3, or 5 top clients, and the rest is just Horai. And that's just how it works. The other biggest risk is their key offering is in unregulated gray area markets. So stuff like crypto, Web3, fantasy sports don't rest on the law. The law is pretty gray on it. So there's risk of frauds, financial irregularities, etc. So if their company, their client gets in trouble, they could get in trouble as well. We did a lot of mehnat on this, dekho, and worked really hard. 1, please like and subscribe. Join Prime, I hope you get in. And put some nice comment. I think all of us would really like that. Can we all do a round of applause, please? Let's just do it. Come on, yeah. That's the end. See you in the next video.